This is the Real Change Wilmington Podcast, episode 69. Wilmington College inaugurates first female president, part 1 of 2, with our guest today, Cockerill.
And so to witness consensus-based decision-making, it was like something I'd never seen. It was incredibly collaborative. It was very complex, but the outcomes are incredibly powerful. You get full buy-in from the room, right? Because everybody has contributed to the solution.
What is going on, everyone? This is your host of the Real Change Wilmington Podcast, Dustin Pierce. I am joined for this intro with our article writer, Molly Campbell. Say hi.
Hello.
Real Change is a positive, constructive, and lighthearted source of local news, events, and resources. On our podcast, we interview leaders of local organizations to help squash rumors and just encourage a greater sense of pride in our community. We have a really great episode for you guys today with our guest, Cockerill, who is the president of Wilmington College. So quick overview of the podcast. Before we get started, we learned that Corey grew up in rural Knox County, Ohio, Mount Vernon area just north of Columbus. She began her career as a journalist in Chillicothe and met her husband at 4-H camp and spent a lot of time on campus when he was attending here as a student. Corey also shared the college's vision for their new agriculture and equestrian center coming in 2028. That'll be off of Fife Road there by their farm, as well as the college's strategic plan for an even greater partnership with our local Wilmington community. So, Molly, you sat in on an interview with Corey as well. What's something fun or interesting that stood out to you about her?
I thought it was cool that in her summers off, when she was a professor at Wilmington College, she used to have a coffee trailer called Fertile Grounds. I thought the ag play on words was really funny and cute.
Yeah, after the podcast, Corey showed us this wall of past presidents, and she made a joke that if she had it her way, she would have them all be interactive, like the pictures in Harry Potter. So I thought it was kind of funny, and just goes to show how lighthearted that she is. And I think Wilmington's going to really benefit from her leadership, not only the college, but our community. So we are super grateful that Randy Sarvis, their communications VP, gave us this opportunity to interview Corey. Apparently had the exclusive interview with Corey before her big inauguration. So super thankful for Randy and Molly for being persistent and getting this interview. So without further ado, let's bring in Corey and get this podcast started. All right, Cockerill, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here. Corey is the president, or soon to be inaugurated president of Wilmington College next week.
Yes.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. We're super honored and excited. So we'll talk about the college here in a bit, but let's first start by getting to know you. Where are you from and what was your life like growing up?
So I grew up in Knox County, Ohio, which is northeast of Columbus, Mount Vernon. My dad was the county engineer, and I grew up right in the middle of town. At the time, it wasn't considered a suburb of Columbus, although now I think the border of Columbus has reached about Knox County, really. It was a rural upbringing. I attended Mount Vernon High School and graduated from Centerburg High School, two relatively small schools, and started my education at Ohio Wesleyan, studying computer science.
Is Ohio Wesleyan in Mount Vernon area?
Delaware County. Yeah,
okay,
just adjacent.
Sure.
Yeah. It wasn't a good fit. I was the only female in the program, computer science. I also got bored writing code at the time, and I was looking for something else. So I transferred to Ohio State and floundered for several years. At some point, I discovered agriculture as a degree program. I was really interested in conservation. I was interested in the Farm Bill, which is a peculiarity, I realize. But
what's the Farm Bill?
So it's the bill that's passed, an omnibus bill that's passed every 5 years that authorizes farmers to practice conservation practices, programs, funding that supports agriculture. And it's not something that gets a lot of attention, but I was really interested in it. So I started researching it, and it became a platform for a master's degree and eventually a PhD.
Very cool.
Yeah. So I discovered agriculture at Ohio State. It was really a field of study that I found intriguing. I went into actually ag communication, which was a combination of journalism and agriculture. Again, not something that you find very often, but I could write And journalism was a field in which I felt like I fit well. It was my first job. I graduated from Ohio State with a degree in Ag Comm, and I got my first job at the Chillicothe Gazette, which had a distribution of 45,000. I thought it was big time.
That is cool.
Yeah, it was really good. I was in charge of stories about rural communities, community profiles, school board, some city council, not much outside of that, no sports or athletics. I loved covering things like the county fair and stories that were unique to natural resources. So they gave me kind of science, STEM, those sorts of stories. And I loved it. But I was handed a project, a story one day that really challenged me as a writer. It was an accidental death of a 6-year-old. It was 2 kids that were messing around with a gun and one shot the other one. They were cousins. And they asked me to cover the story, and I had to cover the funeral and kind of the tragic loss. I had to go to the grandparents' house and capture the life of the 6-year-old. And it was just too much for me to handle. And I knew journalism isn't for me. I don't have thick enough skin. I love to write. So where do I take this skill set, or where do I take this passion? And I took it back to Ohio State into that master's program. So that's how I ended up kind of in academia.
So can you backtrack a bit so I know
Yeah.
the timeline? So you went to Ohio Wesleyan.
Just 1 year.
Okay. And then you went to Ohio State after that, and you
Yep.
got a bachelor's in journalism?
Bachelor's in, journalism and agriculture, yep.
Then you had that experience, and then you went back to Ohio State
I did.
to get a master's in
Yep.
ag.
Yep.
What was your plan with that master's in ag?
Well, so I started with a skill set. I knew I could write,
Mhm.
and I knew I liked scientific writing. So, oh, hi.
Randy's
Sorry.
joining us. Hey.
I knew that I had, a specialized skill set in writing about science, and in particular, writing about agriculture, conservation, rural communities. And I knew if I went back for my master's, I would have more opportunity to write in the form of research. So I dug deeper into that. I got hired as a research associate while I worked on my master's degree. I met my faculty mentor, Dr. Ted Napier, and his area of focus was something called rural or environmental sociology. And it was a field that it really opened up doors for me. It was where I needed to be. I found my home, and he gave me all sorts of research projects, and we started publishing together, and I fell in love with academia. And I stayed for another 6 years.
At OSU?
Yep, 2 more to get a master's, and then 4 more to get a PhD.
So it was rural sociology? Were
Rural
you studying
sociology.
the dynamics of people in rural cultures?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was example projects you guys did? Studied?
Well, we studied public perceptions of things, like public perceptions of GMOs. What is a genetically modified organism? How do people respond to them? What is how does the market respond to GMO? What does non-GMO mean to people? We studied the benefits of buying local and the perception of buy local for communities. This was before farmers markets had really kind of taken a hold in communities, and there were very few farmers markets. So we studied the evolution of farmers markets and the notion of buying local produce and what that meant to the rural economy, strengthening the rural economy. I studied conservation and how farmers adopt conservation practices. I mean, I even studied auctions, rural auctions, and the kind of social dynamics that take place at rural auctions. I studied succession planning for agriculture. So one farm generation to the next, what the transfer of land and resources looks like. I just entered this really a deep dive into all sorts of things. How do people establish a land ethic or an environmental ethic? Where does that come from? And it came back as an opportunity at Wilmington College. I got to teach those things, environmental soc, rural soc, here at the college.
I remember you talking at Cape May, and you said that you met your husband at Wilmington College, right? So how did the connection to Wilmington College start?
Technically, I met him at 4-H camp.
Okay.
My summer job in graduate school was at a 4-H camp in Jackson County, Ohio, Canner's Cave 4-H camp. And I was a lifeguard, and he was a lifeguard. And he was in the summer between his graduation year of high school and his freshman year at Wilmington College.
Okay.
So we met and started dating. And then he came to Wilmington College. And I went back up to Ohio State in my master's program. But as I've said before, I drove down to this campus what seemed like every day with whatever gas money I could save up. And I would camp out in the Watson Library, first floor in the basement. To the left, there was a lounge. Nobody came in, nobody came out. I kind of had a private space. I worked on my research. I published things there. I wrote my master's thesis there, my dissertation there. I think I dedicated my dissertation to the Watson Library staff. They did not know I wasn't a student at Wilmington, but they welcomed me anyway. I met my husband Tate's faculty mentors, Monty Anderson, Don Chafin, who actually just stopped by today to say hello. They really welcomed me as a proxy student. They didn't seem to care that I wasn't a student on campus. And in the end, they helped mentor me as well. And we talked about, would there be an opportunity for me to teach at Wilmington College someday? And I think that was the seed that was planted. That was by Terry Miller, who was in the Student Resource Center at the time. He said, I think you should work at Wilmington College. And so...
This was when you were really young and younger.
I mean, I was a master's student.
Yeah,
I never thought teaching would be the thing that would become, the center of my career. But eventually I discovered teaching instead of research, and I kind of moved into that space, and I enjoyed spending time with college students and really learning with them. It was a great, great atmosphere. My first job, though, with a PhD in hand, was with the Division of Wildlife. I was the electronic communication coordinator, and this was before any of this electronic communication. This was before social media. It was really email and websites. So I managed their website, and I had an e-newsletter. And
did it require a PhD at the time?
No.
Do that kind of stuff?
No. No, it didn't. But I loved it. I always followed jobs that had really powerful mission statements, or missions. And I love journalism. But when I found out the Division of Wildlife had this really powerful mission about honoring, protecting, serving the wildlife of Ohio, it was incredible. My job was an adventure every day. Sometimes we were chasing peregrine falcons. Sometimes we were observing osprey nests. Sometimes we were tracking deer. We were witnessing the reestablishment of bald eagles in Ohio. It was just an incredibly exciting early career for me. But the travel time from my house to Columbus was more than an hour, one direction. And we started having kids, and I took them with me to Columbus in my commute, and it was treacherous and created a lot of anxiety for me. So I thought, I need to look closer to home. I need to look for a different job. And I went on the internet one day, and I saw Wilmington College had a job opening in its communication arts program teaching journalism. And I thought, now's the time. If there's ever a time to pivot, now's the time. So I applied for the job, and I got an interview with Wynn Alexander. And Dan DiBiasio was the president at the time. He and I had met. Of course, I had a great relationship with Wilmington College. Most of the faculty that were Tate's faculty were still here. So they were rallying behind me. You've got to get this job. And I made it through the interview process. So I landed a faculty position here in 2008.
So your husband teaches here as well?
No, he was, by then he graduated. He was fully engaged in his career, but we just live 20 minutes from here. And he's a farmer. He's a third-generation farmer. Our kids are now fourth-generation farmers. And we were landlocked. We were going to kind of set our home base here in Highland County, Leesburg. And I was going to find a job somewhere in a commutable distance. And Wilmington College was the place.
So what are some of your hobbies?
Well, when I got to Leesburg, we got married. We bought a farm. We built a house. And I discovered that Leesburg at the time didn't have any good coffee. None. Like gas station coffee with oil on the top.
Yum.
Yeah. And I had been living in Columbus. Most of my life was in Columbus. I had access to all kinds of coffee. And I couldn't take it anymore. So I said to my husband, hey, I have these summers off as a faculty member. Why don't I buy a roaster and we'll just roast our own coffee? He said, yeah, okay. So I bought a roaster, a big one. And shortly after that, I bought a trailer and we turned it into a mobile coffee shop. And I drove around this county and all the adjacent counties selling coffee out of this mobile coffee shop. I roasted my own. I served at several of our homecoming events. I parked in the lot at the local workout facilities. I parked at some of the medical complexes, and I sold coffee in the summers.
So I know there's a group that does that now called the Drip.
Yeah,
Mobile.
this was pre-drip.
Pre-drip?
Yeah, we were paving the way.
What was yours called?
Fertile Grounds.
Oh,
of course,
man.
as a nod to farmers.
Like the coffee
it was
grounds?
So good,
Oh,
yeah.
that is good. Definitely a journalism branding background.
It was fun. It was the coffee of farmers. No frills, no thrills.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it was good. And that was my hobby for a few years until the director of the ag program retired. And I moved into that role and things got really busy. And I sold the entire roastery to Kava Haus.
Really?
Yes, and all my trade secrets.
Really?
Yeah.
How far along was Kava Haus when you did that?
They were buying beans from another roaster in
Columbus?
No, Cedarville.
Okay.
Now called Orion, but at the time it was called something else.
Mm-hmm.
And they believe in ultra local sourcing. So when they found out that they could roast it themselves and I would show them how, Brad was totally on board.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Man, I've interviewed Brad several times, and that's never come up.
Oh, I'm going to yell at him.
Yeah, you should.
Yeah.
Like, for shame.
Here's the fun part. Full circle, Wilmington College is in the middle of a branding campaign that will involve coffee roasting or like a custom blend for Wilmington College, and we're going to buy from Kava Haus.
Nice.
So the same business I sold them will now serve the college.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's full circle.
That's awesome.
That was a great hobby, and it led to great coffee. Like that was the key. But people really I had friends and neighbors saying, do you have any more of that, custom blend? Do you have any more of that Costa Rican honey jag? And it just got busy. It was crazy. We were roasting 8 hours a week.
Yeah.
Kava Haus ordered 80 pounds a week. It was a tremendous amount of roasting and time in that. So it was a complex hobby.
Yeah.
Outside of that, I'm a runner. I was a runner until I got lazy. And I typically run for St. Jude Children's Hospital as a fundraiser. And I've been doing that for about a decade. It fuels my fandom for cross-country, track, all the runners on this campus. I just wish I could run with them. I can't keep up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty neat.
It's fun.
So how old are your kids now?
So Otis is our oldest. He's coming to Wilmington College in the fall. And my daughter Lila is 15, almost 15. And she's a freshman at Fairfield Local.
Okay.
Yep. I carried Otis in on my hip in my job interview in 2008.
For Wilmington College?
He was 7 months old.
Wow.
So
that's full circle too.
Yeah, he's a campus brat. They've both been raised on this campus. They know the ins and outs. I think they'd like to know the secret spots too that we're going to explore this summer. But
oh, yeah.
Otis is going to be a fighting Quaker this fall.
Now that you have the president keys, you're going to go on the secret spots.
We are this summer. There are places I've never been.
Oh, really?
17 years. Randy's going to walk me through them.
Wow. Is that where the aliens are and stuff or something?
Probably. Ghosts.
Video coming out.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So one question we always ask people is, what's a defining moment of your life that's helped make you who you are, shape your values and personality? It's not meant to be a dark question.
Yeah.
But yeah, if there's any moment.
There is a moment. It's not one that I don't think I've ever referenced, but when I read that question earlier, I thought about it. When I worked for the Division of Wildlife, I was involved in a number of meetings for organizations that had environmental responsibilities or causes. So there was a group called Friends of the Olentangy, Friends of the Olentangy Watershed, FLOW, the acronym FLOW. And as an employee of the Division of Wildlife, I was to go in there and facilitate something. I don't know what they were working on, a project. And they were navigating a particular conflict. And they had a facilitator come in and work with them on consensus-based decision-making. And my whole life, I had only really witnessed decision-making by majority rule, right? You vote, or the loudest person in the room makes the decision. Things are top down. I always yielded to somebody else. I was never the person making the decision. And so to witness consensus-based decision-making, it was like something I'd never seen. It was incredibly collaborative. It was very complex. It was slow in progress. It required hearing everybody's voice. There were people who were, opposed to certain parts. It was like trying to build bridges and find paths forward, even where had we just voted, they would have been left out, right? The minority loses. You're outvoted. So I was thrilled to kind of witness this and be a part of it. And it was a workshop. I learned a lot. And then I started working at Wilmington College a few years later. And we had already been attending a Quaker meeting in Leesburg, my husband and I and kids. But Quaker practices, like business practices, were not part of my everyday routine, decision-making process. And at Wilmington College, we make decisions by consensus. So I rediscovered consensus-based decision-making and what that means. And it's a defining moment for me. Just being part of that, now leading some of those decision-making processes. It is intense. It is complicated. It requires a real commitment to active listening and sort of a keen sense about the room. Like, I'm sensing there's some concern here, or can you talk a little bit more? It's like deep dive, full discovery. But the outcomes are incredibly powerful. You get full buy-in from the room, right? Because everybody has contributed to the solution. It's sometimes slow and arduous. It's not a typical strategy for decision-making at an institution. So you think about how many voices you have to listen to. Here, when you throw students in, we're talking thousands. But again, what comes out, the product that comes out, the decision that we make has full buy-in. And so everybody's committed to it because they contributed to it.
So how is it different than a majority? So everyone has a voice and puts a vote in, the majority wins. How is it different than that?
No, there's no voting.
Okay.
So if we have to make a decision, everybody has to give a perspective.
Okay.
If you agree with the decision, you would vocalize that. You would say, this is what I think. I support this. Mm-hmm. If you don't support it, you vocalize that. I don't support it. We can't move forward if there is a lack of consensus. So the decision dies. Status quo is, the default. So it doesn't neglect perspectives. It doesn't leave people out. If you really are opposed to something and you're trying to build consensus and you're using Quaker practice, you can refuse to stand aside, which means I stand opposed and we are not moving forward with decision making. That will freeze any forward momentum. But you also can stand aside, which means I don't agree, but I'm not going to block it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So does that force other people to be more creative to solving the problem then?
It does.
Okay.
And that's the miracle that you get to witness in the process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can't do it this way, so how are we going to do it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
All we're trying to do is to get everybody's voice. And that's the other challenging part. As a junior faculty, I remember thinking, I don't want to speak up. I don't know if I have a loud enough, Quakers call it weighty, a weighty enough voice to contribute, because I've heard everybody else, but I don't know where I am on this. And so it's a real challenge to commit to speaking up and being part of the decision-making process. It really means everyone's voice. And if you're the person who's facilitating the decision-making, you are the one responsible for ensuring that everybody's contributed.
Mm-hmm.
And it can take a long time to facilitate that. I haven't heard from this group of people, or I haven't heard from this side of the room, or the junior faculty haven't spoken up.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a complicated, complex process, but it's amazing to witness. And it's a really powerful decision-making strategy.
Definitely been part of groups where people talk too much sometimes.
Yeah.
And want someone else to talk.
Oh.
So like I could see that that structured meeting being really like good.
Yeah. It's good. Even our board practices consensus-based decision-making. So they'll work to try to get a sense of the room, and we'll move in that direction as a group.
One question that I have later on, I'll just talk about it now, is Quaker values.
Mm-hmm.
So can you explain what that even means?
To me, it boils down to that Quakers believe in the light of God in every person.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that translates in a value as respect for all persons. We practice respect for all persons on this campus in a variety of ways. Sometimes that means open door policy. You can walk into my office. There aren't barriers to communication because all voices matter, right? There's no hierarchy. This is a very flat organization. We also don't use titles because, again, titles sort of present this barrier to communication. We don't want to stand behind a title. You can't talk to me until you address me this way. It just doesn't work. We practice consensus-based decision-making, part of that respect for all persons. We don't want to leave you out because your perspective is a minority perspective, or because it's not popular, or because you haven't been here long enough. All of that goes away. Every voice matters. We say the campus is built by students, and that's the truth. We're all in. We're all bought in at the same level. So if students say, this is something we believe in, or this is a concern that we have, or we would like to see a change here, there is no weightier voice than another. The student voice means the same as anybody else. We're all part of the community. We all have the same buy-in. We all have the light of God. A more practical example of that might be our prison education program. Education for all. So access to education is something that we work to facilitate, because everybody, first generation college students, those incarcerated, adult learners who are having a different experience, traditional students, those who are commuting, we're going to try to reach everybody the same way. The light of God in each person. It just changes the way we treat people. Everybody's equal.
I was in Lebanon last weekend, and at the Golden Land, they had a bunch of historic pictures of Shakers.
Yes.
Is that different than a Quaker?
It is.
Okay. How is that different?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
No, it's just a different group.
Yeah.
But
one's shaking, one's quaking.
I guess.
Couldn't come to agreement.
I know that those that listening to the podcast can't see this, but in the room, there are pictures around us of students with shovels in hand, mixing concrete, laying bricks, building a dorm. And that's Sam Marble standing on top of his desk, calling the students together. He was addressing the issue of not having enough dormitory space for the male students on campus coming back from the war on the GI Bill. And so he called to the students to build a dorm, and the students built the dorm. So Marble Hall is truly built by students. The cornerstone says that, but that's the truth. And there's an ethos in that still exists today. And it really boils down to respect for all persons.
Yeah.
We're all here together. We are in this community together.
Yeah.
We solve problems together, and we do it one brick, one step, one person at a time.
Yeah. The motto that I accidentally came up with for Real Change Wilmington is that we're a community of empowered individuals. But I don't think everyone lives up to that.
Yeah.
You know? How do you get everyone to buy into having their voice? Yes, that's true top down, but how do you get them to embody that?
Really, I mean, it's hard, right? You can't assume everybody has equal commitment because you have some people who believe in the mission, whatever it is you're doing, more than others. But I think starting with listening, really careful, active listening, gets you halfway. It gets you so far, because ultimately people come and they want to be part of it. For some, it's easier to identify what part they want to contribute. For others, it's harder. So just really listening and figuring out, how can you be part of the solution, or how can you be part of this community?
Mm-hmm.
Those values help you get there, though.
I can see that, yeah. A commitment to not going forward until everyone's voice is heard.
Yes.
I can pulling that out of people who maybe are more reserved. Yeah.
And even the voices that are challenging the direction in which you're headed. And in consensus, that could be one holdout, right?
Mm-hmm.
But working to address the tension with that one holdout is enough to bring them on board sometimes, right? I hear you. I understand. Let's work this out. Quakers often kind of work in the middle, that common ground, that middle ground that's complicated. We're always trying to address, you can't really get anywhere with a polarized group. And if you don't vote, you can't leave people behind. You're all moving together.
Mm-hmm.
And so you really have to identify areas of tension, areas of polarization, and work to build bridges.
Yeah.
Find common ground.
Yeah. There's a lot to explore there, I feel like, but we'll move on.
Okay.
Yeah. No,
Sure.
I have tons of more questions, but
yeah.
So we kind of talked about your career journey a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So can you maybe pull out something you learned in your career journey that you would want to share with students who are entering the workforce? If that makes any sense.
Yeah. I think my advice to students is always, what's your superpower? And at Wilmington College, we work to help students find that. Often it's a 4-year discovery process for students. Sometimes they come here and they really understand what their skill sets are. But finding your superpower means recognizing what makes you unique and leaning into it. And in some cases, that will be a career. In other cases, it's just a skill set that you have. You may be especially great at analyzing complex problems. You may be especially great at building bridges or defining gaps, working through those. You may be great at something as practical as writing or public speaking. And we have such a small campus, we can identify that and help students kind of hone that, refine it, build on it, establish a portfolio around it, practice it in internships or experiential opportunities, and leave here on a path to success. So my advice to students is always, help us find your superpower. Articulate that. What does that mean? What are you good at? If you don't know yet, what brings you joy? Sometimes it's in what brings you joy, because you may not have the confidence to say, I'm really skilled at this or that. But if it brings you joy, it's likely that's something you practice over and over again.
Yeah. I think there's definitely a market for excellence, what you excel in, what's your superpower.
Right.
When I was in college, I graduated with a degree in graphic design, and it was in 2012.
Yeah.
The market was terrible.
Right.
Couldn't find a job. I almost went back to school to be a pharmacist. I a 180-degree career change.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I stuck with it. I had someone who motivated me to just try again, basically.
Yeah.
Get better at my portfolio. And it definitely got me into a career. So
yeah.
I think it would have been a waste to pivot so much. It was better to say what's your talent and build upon that.
Well, often we try to push students toward a career path, I think that's a mistake unless they know very specifically, I want to be or I aspire to this career. Most often they come in with a skill set or a characteristic that usually manifests pretty quickly. You seem to be a great public speaker. What can we do with that? Where do you see yourself taking that? And then a career path evolves. Rarely do they come in and they say, I want to be a blank, right? So if you start with the notion of what is your superpower? What is it that people compliment you on? What do you go into a meeting or a conversation or a relationship knowing, I've got this, I'm effective at? And many students don't know, so we have to work on it. And sometimes we have to identify it, like you seem to be really great at solving puzzles. What can we do with that? Where can we take that?
Yeah. And if at first you don't succeed, try again.
Right. Sometimes recently we've talked about finding purpose and how important it is. Wilmington College is in the business of helping students find their purpose. And your purpose doesn't have to be a conventional career. It can be something much more complex, deeper, values-based. It can be attached to your superpower, or it can be a career. It can be as simple as a career. That's your purpose.
Yeah. I don't know if this relates that much, but Molly was telling me that she has some friends that have recently graduated and like they've changed jobs so many times because the place like wasn't a good value and I guess maybe purpose fit.
Yeah.
So I can see where that's important to like know your purpose. And
yes. Where do you see yourself contributing to the greater good? I mean, that's a big question, right? That's like overwhelming. I don't ask that at the beginning, but eventually as you're working through what is my purpose and where do I fit in? I mean, I would have said I can write. If I could unpack this and reverse build this in my life, it would have been, okay, I can write. Like when the professor came in and said, who likes to write? Raise your hand. My hand would have been up and nobody else's, like 2 or 3 students, maybe in a class of 100. But I could write. I could write poetry. I could write creative writing pieces. I could handle journalism. I got into research. Research became an area that also gave me joy. So I kind of took my skill set, my superpower, and I drove it deeper into research. And that led to a career. That's why I'm here. It's hard to predict that path, but when you unpack your own life, you can probably start with a superpower.
Yeah. Or a marketable skill and then like open the door to another marketable skill and then kept taking it where it led, I guess.
You probably have a design aesthetic. You can probably see things where there are tensions in design that you want to fix. Graphic designers tend to be that way. Yeah.
It spills over to my personal life too, which is bad. I'm just kidding. So, talked about your career journey up until Wilmington College.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about how did you get from a professor to be selected as the next president for Wilmington College?
It's a great question. Certainly not the path I would have anticipated, but when you're in academia, I'm not sure it's a good idea to predict what's next, to try to predict what's next. I was just here for it, whatever it was. I always say I'll love Wilmington College from any angle, no matter what. And for most of my career, I loved it from the classroom angle and with students involved. I came here as a professor of journalism and communication arts. I taught a little bit of web design, HTML. I taught graphic design. I taught social media before it was social. And through the socialization of media, Facebook, really smartphones came out in 2008. That was my first year. So yeah, the field evolved with me. I tried to keep up with it. I never taught the same course the same way twice. It was always new. At some point, I decided to try to create a bridge with agriculture. I met with the agriculture faculty and lobbied them on creating an ag communication program like the one I received my Bachelor of Science degree from Ohio State in. And we talked through, we have a very strong science foundation in our ag program, but there was the social science piece, the rural soc, that I thought we could add value to. And I tried to convince them to add me as a faculty member in their program where I could split, kind of create a hybrid program. And they said yes. So about halfway through my academic career, I moved into a position in agriculture. And I taught ag communication and communication arts both. So I did that until the chair of the program retired, Monty Anderson, who was my mentor. And I moved into the chair position.
Of the ag program.
Yeah. I chaired that program for about 2 years, and the opportunity was presented to me to serve as an assistant dean for the sciences. And I saw that as a challenge. It was at the time meant to kind of straddle faculty and administration and work the space in between, which you now know, I love working the space in between. I feel like I kind of live in the middle of everything. And I did that for a year until the board approached me and said, there's a transition happening with the president, and we'd like for you to consider interim. Again, I said, well, I will love this institution from any angle. I'll do anything for the institution. I believe in its mission, but most importantly, I believe in its students. So if you think, this is to the board, if you think it's in the best interest of Wilmington College students for me to serve in this role, I'm glad to do it, honored to do it. And so that transition happened 2 years ago.
I feel like the best kind of leader, or at least the best kind of leader story, is the one who doesn't really want to do it or didn't aspire to do it, but is more than willing to serve in that role.
Yeah, the kind of love that I have for this institution. I think you asked a question. You have a question in your list about something about...
What keeps you passionate?
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's the students, right? And I always just want what's best for them. That kind of love comes from 17 years of serving them. I don't know what it would be like to just kind of come in off the street, try to get to know an organization and establish that connection. I had a deep-rooted connection to our students. I felt like I had a sense of what they needed at the time, which was a lot of love, a lot of listening, an open door. Some of that respect for all persons core value that we discussed. And I knew I could do that if that's what they needed, right? And that's what they needed at the time. That's what the whole campus needed at the time.
I've only heard good things about you as president. So,
well, I appreciate that, but
give it a year and we'll see what they're saying.
It's all about the people. It's all about the community. Yeah. It's a tremendously committed community, and they're committed to those students and their success. And there's nothing more powerful. It's just great. So that's how I ended up in this role.
Yeah.
I said yes.
And next Tuesday is your inauguration.
It is.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's you may not know this about me, and I'm going to say it in the inauguration speech. I am very much an introvert. Living the life now of an extreme extrovert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think being an introvert helps you be more in tune with people, so that going back to the whole consensus thing, as an introvert, you probably sense, like, I want to pull his personality a little bit more, So I think that's helpful to be an extrovert and to be a leader down the road.
Yep. Turns out introverts are great at listening.
Yeah.
And sensing. You're right, to your point. But yeah, so an inauguration with a lot of people is something that's going to take me out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe you can do like the singers do nowadays. Just pre-record your speech and just lip sync it like right there.
I practice it in the car ride every day.
Yeah.
I do. Yeah.
That's so funny. That's what you got to do.
It is.
Can you give us a brief history of the college? So Quaker started,
Quakers bought the college in 1870. Early on, the primary degree program was education. So we had mostly education majors here. There were some moments in the college that were significant. One was in 1948, I believe the college bought its first farm. 68. 48, that's right. Roy Joe Stuckey convinced this is again the notion of all voices matter, right? Roy Joe knocked on the president's door and said, hey, there's a farm up for sale. It was 200 some acres. Yeah. And said, I think we should buy it. I think we should start a farm. And students could work there, and we could milk cows and have dairy, have, our own dairy that would support the campus cafeteria. And the president at the time said, okay, we'll do it. And that was the start of the ag program.
Wow.
Yeah. So education is still a large major, but the institution has evolved toward sports sciences and allied health. It's kind of an area of growth and significant momentum, and agriculture is still the largest major. And I'm happy to say, and this is probably the first time we've said it out loud, we just passed a graduate program in agriculture.
What does that mean?
It means we'll have a graduate class, a master's of science in agriculture next year.
That's awesome.
It's very exciting.
And you have some plans at Cape May. You talked about some new facilities for ag too?
We do. We have...
Is it equestrian or ag? Is it both?
Both.
Okay.
So we have the largest equestrian team at a small private institution in the nation. We have 63 riders on our team, and they're headed to the nationals this year for the first time in program history as a team. It's incredible. But to service 63 riders, you need a lot of horses.
Yeah.
And we have 28 stalls and we have 32 horses, many of them donated to the college. We're out of space. So the equine program is busting at the seams. The ag program is a third of our students on campus.
Really?
Yep. So it's enormous. And we have to squeeze nearly 300 ag students into labs that only fit 24. So it's a Tetris game that's almost impossible to play.
With like the time slots and things?
Yes, yeah. And we're committed to experiential learning, hands-on, high impact. And to do that, we need more space. We're just out of room, especially with the approval of a new graduate program. So we have a proposed new facility that would go adjacent to the equestrian center that would expand...
Your equestrian center?
Our equestrian center, yes.
Fife Road?
Yep,
okay.
Fife Avenue.
Not the World Equestrian Center?
No,
okay,
nope.
Yeah.
Just here up the road where horses can kind of pass through. It would be an arena for competition. It would be an arena for... We have a growing animal science pre-vet program. There would be a lab off the arena so you could move animals in and out very efficiently. 17 additional horse stalls along the back. It would allow us to do, you probably are familiar now with the show circuit. We have cattle shows and swine shows and all sorts of livestock shows in the area.
Yeah.
This could be a destination for that. It would be a community center that has opportunity to host events. It would triple our classroom size, 80 additional seats to 40-seat classrooms and another 24-seat lab. So it's a multi-purpose facility located right on the academic farm.
And that's proposed and planned for when?
2028.
Okay, so not that far away.
We're fundraising now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about a $5 million facility. We have $1.2 million raised. We're on the verge of a campaign that will help us raise those funds.
So if I give some money, can I put my name on something?
Yes.
Really?
You tell me what.
Okay.
So far we have... Yeah,
I don't know.
That could work. So we have the classroom and laboratories both have names. We have public and private interest. I'm still looking for an arena name.
The whole arena?
Yeah, the whole arena.
Yikes.
Yeah.
I probably can't write check that.
Community gardens out front.
Uh-huh.
And it's an incredible facility, a really great media center up top a crow's nest that looks out over the whole arena.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be great. It'll serve the community well.
How does the current team, do they at all partner with the World Equestrian Center?
We do.
That's
we have
a huge thing in the community also.
Yep. Students who ride there, students who intern there, students who work in like the shops.
Mm-hmm.
They're our connection in many ways to local competition.
Yeah.
So yeah, we work well together.
That's neat that our area will be even more known for ag and equestrian.
Yep. We beat the big institution up the road to compete for this national championship, and our riders will compete for nationals on May 2nd and 3rd in, I believe, North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's great. We have individual riders, and our whole team is competing for the first time.
That is sweet.
Yep.
Something to be proud of for sure.
It's
Everybody,
great.
Wilmington and the college,
It's great. It's just a matter of what happens if we grow.
Past that.
It's the challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the areas where we're really successful. I would be remiss if I didn't say the other part. We are known for sports sciences, really all the STEM fields, allied health. One of our largest growing areas is a new area called sport nutrition. So that's part of that sport management, exercise science appeal. But part of what makes us really special is our deep commitment to liberal arts. So students still take in their general education a wide variety of liberal arts courses. So fine arts, humanities, social science, and natural science, a balance of each. And it's really important.
So last time I heard you talk at Cape May, you mentioned problems an undergraduate is facing nationally.
Yeah.
Can you kind of like touch on some of those?
Yeah.
How they affect Wilmington College as well?
Higher ed is really getting attacked from a number of different angles, from, the value proposition, whether it's worth it, whether we need college-educated individuals as much as we might not, the impact on communities. There is definitely a concern about the number of high school graduates coming up the pipeline starting next year. They call it the demographic cliff. That's probably what I mentioned the last time we talked.
What does that mean?
It just means there are fewer high schoolers graduating.
Was it because of like a baby boom or something that
2008?
2008 was
economic downturn.
Okay.
You remember the recession, fewer babies born. It just means fewer high school graduates.
Okay.
So we've reached that point. It's likely to impact us for the next decade. So we have to prepare for fewer traditional students. That's where our strategic plan came in, anticipating that. And this has been something we've been anticipating since 2008, right? Or 2009. So how do we make up for the gap that we'll see in traditional undergraduate education? It just means educating other people who still have a need for college education. That might be adult learners seeking credentials or micro-credentials, upskilling. That might mean incarcerated individuals who are looking for that opportunity. That might mean online learners who are looking for a different type of education or a different modality. It may mean international students who are seeking a degree from the United States, whether that's in person or online. And so we've really tried to push ourselves into those areas and define better our ability to serve all audiences, really diversifying the enrollment portfolio.
Yeah.
That's been the challenge. And it's the challenge for everybody. It's not unique to Wilmington College.
Right.
What I believe is our superpower is that we're small and agile, and we're able to really push ourselves into those spaces. So we have new initiatives, new programs that are working to kind of foster academic opportunities in those spaces for those target audiences.
It's neat that some of those, like the prison program, fits your values as well.
Yeah, it does. I mean, that was a program that was established in the 1960s. Wilmington College, based on its mission, sought to educate incarcerated individuals. Was connected to the Pell program in the 80s. 1984, we became the first institution in the state of Ohio to offer a 4-year bachelor's degree in the prisons. We had presence at multiple prisons at the time. And we also received state funding until about 2012, 2013, when both the federal government had pulled out and the state pulled out and said, we're not funding prison education anymore. Wilmington College stayed in. We offered book clubs and music enrichment just to kind of keep that connection, because it really wasn't about, the funding model. It was about maintaining opportunities for incarcerated individuals. And when we found out that the Pell program was now going to also cover incarcerated students, we already had relationships with all of the local prisons. We had relationships with the staff and the wardens. And all we had to do was really go through the application process, which was an enormous task. It was a mountain to climb. We had to get through approval with the Department of Education, the Department of Higher Education, our accreditors at the Higher Learning Commission, our own board, all sorts of approvals that took about a year. almost a year and a half. And we had our first courses on May 13th of 2024. And now we have 150 students in the program.
That's awesome.
I will say at one point we had 800.
Okay.
We had a whole commencement ceremony. We had ball teams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard about that. Yeah.
So we've been here before. We know this space. This is an area in which we have an expertise and a deep connection to our mission. So, there are a lot of people who are proud and glad to see us back in the prisons.
Mm-hmm. Time-wise, are we doing okay?
We're okay, but we have Westby's tonight, so I am on a mission to...
How much more time is that?
I probably have... Hang on, let me make sure I'm not... I have 5 minutes.
You have 5 minutes?
Sorry, yeah.
That's fine. Let me see what's the most important question we can close with then.
Let me see if I'd like this. You had a great... The question about the community.
Okay.
I mean, that would be my preference.
About...
You said, can we talk a bit about... Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I tease that out by chance?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So we have more questions, but based on time and stuff, we're going to just skip ahead here. We might be back on later on or something.
Yeah.
But can you just talk briefly about the relationship the college has with our community?
Yes.
Wilmington, City of Wilmington.
So, I have 17 years with the college, and I've always felt like the college was part of the community. But when I came into this role, especially as an interim president and now as the seated president, the goal was, how can we be perceived as an anchor institution for the community? In other words, how can we become not just a community with a college in it, but a college community? And I have to say, we work on that challenge every single day. How do we get, our name out? How do we get our name into conversations? How do we get our brand onto menus or, across different products or services in the community? Where can we be partners? Where can we be kind of default collaborators, right? At what point will the community consider Wilmington College when it's looking for opportunities or it's looking for educational services that they wouldn't have considered us before? What we don't want to be is just that college up the road that serves traditional 18-year-old students in residence dormitories on campus. We don't want that. It can't work. And the community, I recognize now, needs us to be more than that, and we want to be more than that.
Yeah.
So it's built into the strategic plan, pillar number 4, and it's really about connecting to the communities that support and are supported by the institution. What does that mean? How can we be in those spaces? How can we help them achieve their goals, right? How can we be the default collaborator? So I think you asked about, in some of your questions, you're asking about signs in town and things like that. That's just the tip of the iceberg. That's just us getting started in the process of like a deep infusion into the community.
Yeah.
We aspire to be so much more.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and we'll definitely have you back on later on.
Let's do this again sometime. Yeah, sounds good.
All right, good luck, and thanks for having us here in your office.
Thanks for your time. I appreciate it. Look forward to hearing this.
Well, that's it for our podcast today, folks. Hope you enjoyed our interview with Corey Cockerill at Wilmington College. If you have more questions or ideas for her, please feel free to reach out to her directly. If she'll talk to us dorks, she will certainly talk to you as well. After all, we are a community of empowered individuals.
If you want to get in touch with Real Change Wilmington, you can contact us on our website at realchangewilmington.com, visit our Facebook and Instagram pages, or grab a free copy of our local newspaper at Kroger, Sam's Meats, and Fiesta Veracruz. We also currently send our newspaper direct mail to over 2,500 Wilmington residents. So if you want to help us cover our printing cost and advertise your local business, event, or job posting, please email us at advertise@realchangewilmington.com.
With that, I'm your host, Dustin Pierce. Keep it real, Wilmington.